best way to describe it, it feels like I've been given 10% more throttle. And that is what it is. If you look at the dyno graph, it is a 10% improvement all throughout the entire curve. That's what it feels like. For the old girl. Don't drive like that. I just did that to show you guys what it sounds like. So don't drive like that, please. Is that a good enough intro for the video? Okay. All right. Good to have you guys back. So in my last video, I gave you guys a very brief look at the standalone conversion of this car, and I promised that I will make a in-depth video about it. So that's what I plan to do in this video, and I'm sorry it's taken such a long time for me to get to it. Nothing's wrong with the car per se, it's just been very busy with work. I chose to fit the car with a Link Fury ECU, and there's no particular reason. It's just because my friend who is a tuner, he highly recommended it to me. To be honest, that's pretty much the only reason. And also, the guy who I chose to do this project with, he's done 2 other cars before, 2 other E34 M5s, and both of those are using the Link Fury ECU. So it just made sense. I don't want to be someone's experiment. If someone's done it before using whatever setup they've done before and it's proven to be successful, then sure, I'll just go with whatever they recommend. So I'll turn it off and pop the latch and let's have a look. Okay, under the hood you will see most immediately the direct coil conversion. So this engine is the 3.6, which meant that from the factory, unlike the 3.8, the 3.8 came with direct coils. The 3.6 on this car originally came with a distributor, which is over here, but you can see we removed the distributor, and in its place we have a blanking plate, which is nicely machined. And on top of the blanking plate, we inserted a cam position sensor, and so that is essentially digitizing what the distributor is doing. I like the touch of having the Bosch coils, just because it's a German coil on a German engine. It makes perfect sense and it looks good. These wires, very nicely done. Alright, now moving to the other side of the engine. Over here, oh, that's not good. That came loose. Okay, I need to get that sorted. Anyway, once that's fixed, this used to be where the MAF was. So the MAF is kind of the biggest headache of this engine. Whoever uses the S38 will have experienced some kind of issues with the MAF, and the truth of the matter is they are extremely difficult to troubleshoot and very difficult to replace. and also very difficult and expensive to fix. So this is one of the main reasons why I decided to go standalone, is because my MAF has never been working properly since I bought the car. In fact, I sent the MAF to England twice, and each time it was not cheap because I sent it via DHL. Just that alone is a lot, and plus the labor of fixing it, getting it back. The first time I got it back, it was running too lean. Then the second time it was too rich, and so it's just, by doing it this way, I'm putting in a lot of faith in someone else who's halfway around the world, and they cannot test the MAF on my car. And maybe it's not their fault. Maybe the MAF they did is perfectly fine, but maybe the other sensors on my car are just not working well, and all these things makes troubleshooting the car just so much more difficult. And so the main reason why I decided to go standalone on this car is actually not because I wanted additional performance. No, the main reason why I went with standalone on this car is because I wanted it to be reliable, and on top of that, the added performance would be a bonus, but that's not the main reason. Okay, I know you guys will be thinking, what am I doing? Well, it's only temporary. I'll fix it once I get back to my place, all right? But this needs to rotate and go back to where the slot is. What else? Okay, you see this right here? This is a MAP sensor, so it measures the manifold air pressure. Just makes tuning the ITVs a bit better during near idle conditions. The TPS sensor. The original engine doesn't really use the TPS sensor. The TPS sensor is kind of like an on-off switch when used on the original ECU. But now we are using mostly the signal from the TPS to do the fueling, which you'll see is very good for the throttle response. The fuel regulator, I decided to keep it the same. It's still 3 bars for now. I might upgrade it because the engine is making more power, and also I'm running it on E20, which is 20% ethanol fuel blend. I think I've covered most of it. Oh, this I really like. This used to be the diagnostics plug, but now this is where the ECU harness is. It just plugs in right to here. Looks completely factory. It's great. So let's get back into the car, and then I'll talk about how it drives and what problems I have right now. Starting it up. Before, when the engine is idling, you can feel it go brum, 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 kind of like that. Now it's very smooth. On a very hot day, because we're not exactly done with tuning this engine yet, on a very hot day, the RPMs start to drop, and when they get below around maybe below 700, it starts to get lumpy again. So that's one of the things that I need to get fixed. Which brings me to troubleshooting and diagnostics, because this is by far, I think, by far the biggest advantage of running a standalone system, and that is you can log everything. And with the power to be able to log everything, you are able to troubleshoot scientifically and be able to pinpoint whatever problems you have. For example, we are running it on the Dyno, and the power figures I'll show you. We thought that maybe we could get a few more horsepowers, and so we checked the log, and what we saw was, because we added a fuel pressure sensor, which originally the car did not have, we saw that the regulator is supposed to keep the fuel pressure at 3 bars, but towards the higher RPMs, the fuel pressure started to drop. And so we thought, okay, that might signify maybe I need to upgrade my fuel pump, or perhaps the original fuel pump on my car is no good. So I looked up the fuel pump specs on the E34 M5 on the 3.6, and it's 100 liters flow rate, which, to be honest, is quite low for the kind of engine this is. So what I'm gonna do is just to get rid of this problem completely, but also because I'm running more power, I'm using an ethanol blend, which naturally will require a slightly higher flow rate. I decided to use a 255 liter flow rate, which I will install next month. But on top of that, we also saw that the voltage started to drop towards the higher RPMs, or when it gets hot, the voltage gets to around high 12s, which is not good, which means the alternator is not doing its job. And so I got my alternator fixed. All these things, I would never have been able to tell that the fuel pump was going out, the alternator is going out on the stock car. It's just not possible. There are no gauges for that. And that's why I love this standalone system. Also, another thing is, without the MAF, all the new sensors that I put into this car, they're all dirt cheap. You can buy them locally, and it's just so much more convenient. Now, the bit that most of you care about is, okay, now that I've gone standalone, does this engine feel like it's a different engine? Is it day and night? And truth be told, it feels pretty much very similar to what it was before. I would say the best way to describe it is like OEM plus. Alright, so it still feels OEM, but it just feels better than OEM. Better how? Well, the throttle response is probably the biggest thing. Before, one of my biggest complaints when driving my car, and that could just be my car, maybe my car was not in the pristine condition as it should be, but I tried very hard to get the engine just right, but it was just so difficult. So my car, before the standalone, when I downshift, so right now I'm in 4th, and I want to downshift to 3rd by doing a simple rev match. Now it's so easy to blip the engine. Before, if I did that, the engine would kind of hesitate to blip up. It sort of makes like a sound, like almost as if it's too lean, like the injectors are too slow or not injecting enough fuel or something. But now it's so easy to blip, and just having that improvement alone to me is worth it, because one of the joys of driving a manual is perfecting a downshift, right? It's so enjoyable to be able to do a good downshift. Yeah, of course, you get added performance when you go standalone. The horsepowers, you can see compared before and after, I get more torque and more horsepower. Overall, the area under the curve is just better. But once you get used to the new power delivery of your new standalone engine, it's not something that stands out anymore. It becomes normal. And so I would say that if you are an M5 owner and you think your engine is perfect, then maybe you don't need to go standalone. But if you are like me, you are chasing perfection, or you have a problem that you just cannot fix. For example, you know that you need a new MAF sensor, and it's kind of a bet if you want to buy a second-hand used one, because it might also be broken, and it's also very hard to test if it's broken. And buying one of those it's getting more and more expensive. If you're having problems like that on your car, then yes, I would highly recommend you to go standalone. Maybe you don't have to use Link, because Link is not cheap. Maybe some other ECU will do. I think, and maybe it might be the feeling, it's very hard to prove, but I feel like gas pedal just feels more linear than it did before. There were several flat spots on the original dyno run before going standalone. If you look at the graph, you see it makes a lot of squiggles. But after running standalone, the graph is a lot flatter, and that translates to a more linear sort of engine pull and throttle response. I would say if you're expecting the standalone system to somehow transform the way your car drives, then you shouldn't do that. If you want a transformation, perhaps you should turbocharge your M5 or something crazy. But if you want refinement, if you want something that's easier to daily, easier to troubleshoot, then I highly recommend it. You know, these M5s, their values are going up, and I don't know if changing out the factory ECU to something standalone, would that ruin the value of the car? I really don't know, but know this, right? Going standalone is not irreversible. You can always put it back to factory spec if you do want to sell it, if the new buyer cares that much about keeping it as original as possible. But if you're planning on driving the car as much as you can, enjoying it as much as you can, reducing the amount of headaches you have with the car, then I highly recommend it. And with the ECU like Link Fury, you can do all kinds of trick stuff. You know, you can do traction control, you can do launch control if you want, if you're crazy. You can do like methanol ejection and all these crazy things. But that's not really for me. I just wanted something that's reliable and easy to diagnose. And like I said, additional power, I view it as a bonus. It's not something that I wanted or needed. Going back to the tuner who did this car. So I mentioned earlier, he did 2 other cars before. So the first car, he said, was very similar to my car. That being, when he started working on it, the car was not perfect to start with. And so the horsepower gains is really not bad at all, similar to my car. He saw like a 10% horsepower gain, which is pretty good. But the second car, he said, that car was a time machine. That car, even on stock, with the stock ECU, was putting down 315 horsepowers to the hubs, because he was using a hub dyno to the hubs. That's as much as what my car is making now. And running it on standalone, he only gained 5 horsepowers. 5. All the money he spent, he got 5 horsepowers. But once again, that's not how I see it. I'm not gonna go too crazy, because as you remember, the intake is not on properly. Going back to the time machine car, 5 horsepowers. Yeah, the owner was still happy with it, because in the end, he had something that he knows is gonna be far more reliable than the original car, and easier to maintain. Like I said, sensors are cheaper like that way. In the end, it allows you to enjoy the car much more. It's a win-win, really. One thing I love about this car is how deep the gas pedal is. It just keeps on going. I'm sort of used to driving hot hatches, and usually hot hatches, the pedal travel is like, it's like this much, right? Something like this. But on this car, the pedal travel is like double of that. It's super long. You just feel like, oh, there's more power on reserve, and you just keep going, and more power keeps coming. It's a very nice feeling. Which brings me to the clutch on my car, because the 3 pedal inputs, you have the gas, the brakes, and the clutch. The gas and the brakes on this car are both very long travel, but the clutch on my car, it's my mistake. When I was restoring it, the mechanics, they advised me to use a copper compound clutch, which now I know I actually don't really like. These copper clutches, they're way too grabby. There's not much progression with the biting point, and I get it on some cars, maybe like on a Mitsubishi Evo. It sort of makes sense. It suits the characteristics of that car. But on the M5, when paired with the other 2 pedals, having a very short clutch pedal paired with the long brake pedal and the gas pedal, it just doesn't work together. It's not cohesive. And that's one thing that really matters to me, is the cohesiveness of all the controls of the car. I mean, this is a luxury car. It's supposed to feel this way. It's supposed to feel wallowy and not so athletic, but it's got power on reserve. And when you do want it to turn, it's able to turn with a slightly more dramatic body roll than you like, but that's the characteristics of a car like this. And so this clutch pedal needs to go. I will change it back to stock, to something that's a lot more progressive. And after that, I think pretty much the car will be done. Done meaning mechanically done. I still need to fix the paint and fix the interior. The interior on this is kind of shady at the moment. Thank you. What else needs to be done on this car? Oh, I should bring this up. This is a right-hand drive, which means the exhaust manifold is different. It's different to the ones that are left-hand drive. Different how? Because on the right-hand drive, it needs to implement additional heat shielding to protect the clutch fluid and the clutch cylinder and maybe the other stuff. And so the exhaust manifold on this car, by design, is not as efficient, not as performance oriented as the left-hand drive ones. So perhaps if you are going standalone with your left-hand drive M5, you probably will be seeing slightly better power figures than my car, towards the maybe like the last 500 RPMs of the engine. And that's because the left-hand drive header, it's bigger in diameter, and I think the runner lengths are also a bit longer as well. And speaking of the heat shields, on my car, somehow the heat shield on the exhaust manifold is missing, and so that's messing with my clutch fluid. It's turning brown really fast. So I ordered a new factory heat shield just because I wanted to look a bit more factory. I know it contradicts what I did to the rest of the engine bay going standalone, but you know, what can you do? So hopefully having the heat shield will fix the clutch liquid going brown, and then mechanically the car will be sorted. Alright, I hope that is a detailed enough video for you guys to understand what's been done in my car. And if you have any additional questions about the standalone system, do feel free to hit me up, and I'll try to answer it as much as I can. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.